Don't you never forget I can burn your shit down to the ground, detective. What about that task force bullshit? What they getting into?
They ain't got nothing on nobody. No suspects at all.
This season, Agent Tanner and the task force are on the hunt. He's made no secret he and the task force were looking into the major crime families in New York. They've made efforts to try and infiltrate the Italian mafia through Sal Buscemi, brought in Stefano for questioning, agents working undercover, but they still haven't managed to caught their major break in the investigation. They've been going around in circles and haven't got anyone for the South Jamaica houses or Paisley Park projects. Add in the fact that Detective Howard, Rock and Lou gave them a bogus story about Crown Camacho, and with Howard keeping them off track, they've been hitting dead ends. Now this video serves as a part 2 which follows on from last week's investigation, which centered around Marvin Thomas, especially how his face ended up on Agent Tanner's desk. But I did mention, Howard and Famous did remain on my personal investigation board, and so in this video, we're going to focus on how Detective Howard could be in trouble, and the case for why he could end up in an orange jumpsuit. We're also going to tie in Marvin into the investigation, as well as an update for Famous, bringing in together all the clues for the investigation board for Raising Kanan Season 3.
Every hood got a cop like Malcolm Howard. Act like he owned the streets. Like we all answer to his ass. Like he the biggest gangster around the way. But it ain't that simple.
The investigation will never be simple when it comes to Detective Howard, because of who he is, the connections that he has, and the secrets that he holds, which is why we have to go all the way back to Season 1. He was partners with Detective Beck, who is a rookie cop, but eager to make a name for herself because she came from a family of cops, and she wanted to prove she belongs here, but their partnership wasn't as straightforward. Detective Howard had secrets that he'd been hiding from Beck, but he was also giving her a few lessons along the way, around who the major players were, investigating crime scenes, and teaching her the ropes, and so she was always asking the right questions.
What is with you and that kid?
Unfortunately, they were torn by one chasing justice, and the other one was looking up to cover up bad mistakes and crime scenes, because many of them involve Rock, but also his son, Kanan Stark. Now, because of the family that Beck came from, she was ambitious. She wanted to make a name for herself, and she wasn't going to let Howard fuck up her shot. So we did see her doing her own digging, but she was repeatedly warned, leave this shit alone.
I'm telling you to leave this shit alone.
You know, you tell me a lot of things. That's pretty much all you do.
But you don't listen.
Now, Beck has always had issues trusting Detective Howard, but more so when he was shot at Paisley Park. She knew something just didn't quite add up, so she questioned it straight away with a doc around his memory loss. From here on, we knew Beck was going to be a big problem, and it was clear that she hadn't taken Howard's warnings on board to leave this shit alone. She was always sticking her nose into business she shouldn't be, which is also what contributed towards her downfall. Now, Beck isn't the only one who plays a part when it comes to my investigation board for Detective Howard. So does Scrappy and his mom Chantel, who were busted for an illegal gambling operation. But this is where Howard got it all the way wrong, because he thought Scrappy was a CI when it was Chantel, and we all know what soon followed. Very similar to how Ghost made the mistake in killing Roller, Rock made a similar mistake, one which is still having a domino effect till this very day in Season 3. Now, what followed with Detective Beck was all of her own making. She stuck her nose in business she shouldn't have with Duke, which ended up putting a target on her back, but she was relentless in her pursuit for justice, even when everybody around Beck warned her. And this is the conversation that I want you guys to keep in mind when we come back around to Captain Beck.
Howard, he keeps a hell of a lot of stuff to himself, and there's been some moments where I wonder if he's holding shit back from me about what happened.
Now, Captain Beck isn't the only one who we need to keep in mind, so is Adina Foyle. She mentioned that she worked with Howard for a brief period on a previous task force, and he wasn't exactly the easiest to work with, but in her words, he was a dick. Again, Adina is someone who we are going to come back around to. Now fast forward, Beck continued to do some more digging where she uncovered Rock was Howard's CI back in the day. She also connected the dots to how they had a son, Kanan Stark, and that's why he was so obsessed with the Thomas family. But the problem that she was finding was, she knew where this shit started, but she had no idea where it ends, which was pretty ironic, because we know how it ended when it came to Kanan and Duke, but we didn't know how it started. But back to Beck. The other couple of problems she had was she failed to take on Howard's warning, Adina's warning, her father's warning, and also the captain's warning, and that ended up with her being investigated by IAD, which resulted in her losing her girlfriend, her job, and then later her life.
If something happens to me, it's not going to be what it looks like.
Now, Howard really was cold with it when he gave the eulogy at Beck's funeral, especially knowing he was the one behind her death. But Adina Foyle knew better because Beck warned her in 210, if she goes then it wouldn't be what it looked like. Now at the time Captain Beck wasn't interested. As far as he was concerned, Adina had a hand in whatever happened to his daughter, although losing Shannon hadn't quite sunk in yet, which is normal. Sometimes it does take a while. Now in pursuit of justice and to clear Beck's name, Adina wasn't letting this case rest, so Howard wanted to back off and let it go, which is something Beck refused to do, and she was wise. So until 307 she remained a ghost, which is something we are going to get to. Now in the meantime, Howard was busy at the precinct. He'd been trying to send Agent Tanner and the task force down the wrong direction by giving him false targets to throw their investigation in Crown Camacho's direction, but that hasn't worked. Agent Tanner isn't buying the Crown story, but not only that, he was keeping his cards really close to his chest when it came to the other suspects and the targets. So here's where it starts to get a little complex for Howard's story, because Agent Tanner was withholding information and not giving him too much. He made a move to take Ogden's role at Creed's Narcotics, which in turn would allow him to oversee this task force. In his mind, the closer he gets, the more information he can get his hands on, and the more influence he can have. However, the captain did warn him, be very careful what you wish for when it comes to this task force. Now in 307, Howard learned that he did get the job he was in, but there was one loophole that they had to go through: background checks.
These feds and this task force got to run an enhanced background check. Talk to a few folks who know you. It's a formality.
As long as they don't talk to any of Howard's old girlfriends, he'll be okay.
Now just before we get to the background checks and a few theories, Shannon's father, Captain Beck, started to come round to the regret and guilt of his daughter's death. He's got all these unanswered questions. He wished he did things different and also maybe listened to her when it came to Howard, and that's why he reached out to Foyle. Now at this moment in time, she wants nothing to do with Howard, because I think she knows he had something to do with Beck, and she doesn't want to end up next to her ex-girlfriend. So with that being said, that brings me over to the questions, thoughts, and theories. Adina Foyle was Howard's ex-partner on a previous task force, and not only does she know what he's like, I think she knows he did have something to do with Beck's death. So the more she looks at this picture, the more she's going to start to think about Captain Beck's regrets. Will she soon change her mind and look for justice by clearing Beck's name? Which brings me back around to Howard's background checks, the final hurdle that Howard has to go through. Is Captain Baptiste going to be proven right? Did he get more than he bargained for by trying to take Ogden's role? Will this backfire when they start to do his background checks? Because as we all know, that's not the only thing he's hiding. Let's not forget, Beck's entire investigation was at Foyle's. All it takes is for her to have a change of heart and desire to pursue justice to clear Beck's name, and the whole house of cards could end up coming down. So I would not be surprised if Foyle is one of the characters that is approached when it comes to Howard's background checks. Maybe Foyle talks, which lands Howard in a huge heap of trouble that would connect all the way back to Beck's investigation and her death in 301. It's definitely one to keep an eye on. Now, in my last investigation breakdown, I questioned how did Marvin's face end up on Agent Tanner's desk? Was it Gerald Moore after hearing Tony's name? Could it have been the former employee at Lane's? Who was it? And why was Tanner so willing to open up to Detective Howard about a potential suspect all of a sudden? Now after 307 we have even more questions, such as why did Howard not protect Marvin? He said it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility Marvin could have been the one behind Paisley Park and the South Jamaica houses. And then when Rock asked him about the task force, he said they have no suspects. He kept the Marvin case really close to his chest. So it does make you wonder, what's his play? Is Howard keeping this case close just in case he finds himself in trouble, where he'd then be able to use this as leverage? Just like Rock said, she can bend his shit all the way down. Well, if Howard kept this quiet, maybe he's got his own bargaining chip if he ever finds himself in the firing line. Now let's flip this and take a look at a different perspective. Are the feds onto Howard and does he need to watch his back? Did Agent Tanner open up to Howard to see if he takes the bait and goes to Rock with this information? Because if he did, then Howard was smart because he didn't tell Rock. But either way, there are a lot of chess moves that are being played here, but one thing's for sure, the task force isn't going anywhere without busting someone. But having said that, let's take a look at Chantel next. When Howard saw Chantel walking through the precinct with Detective Peng, he managed to trade places. He then found out she was here because Lou went over drunk and sounded like he was there when her son was taken out. But we all know Howard had something to do with Scrappy's death because he gave Rock bad intel. He also warned Chantel that if she talks to anyone, then she knows what happens in these streets, which should make us question. If she knew what happened to Scrappy and what could happen to her, could she have given this information to someone else before she bit the dust? Because it did seem like she knew she was going out. Could this also touch Agent Tanner's desk when her body is found, which puts Howard in the firing line, because he's actually the one that gave the info to Rock, which ended up with Lou pulling the trigger. So could Agent Tanner or someone else connect the dots back to Detective Howard? As I mentioned before, I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as Agent Tanner just looking at Marvin. I do think Howard is equally in the firing line. Whether Adina Foyle looks for justice, whether Agent Tanner's onto him by throwing him some bait, or whether Chantel or Burke's death comes back to haunt him, at some point, the chickens will come home to roost for Detective Howard. But will it be this season? Could Howard be the one to end up in an orange jumpsuit? Now, just a quick one on Famous. It does seem like he does still hold a murder weapon that he used on Freddy, so this is just one to keep an eye on. Could law enforcement potentially find it? Will his mother find it? Or could he potentially even use it? After episode 7, nothing changes for me in terms of which 3 still remain in trouble. Famous, Detective Howard, and Marvin Thomas. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section on the case for Detective Howard. Could Adina Foyle clear Burke's name? Is Agent Tanner trying to bait Howard? Or could Chantel also be connected back to him as well? Drop all your comments down below in the comment section. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.